The radio telescope dish moved like a giant eye searching the night sky. Dr. Amy Foster watched the numbers scroll across her computer screen in the small control room. She had been working the night shift for 3 years now, listening for signals from space. Most nights brought only static and the usual background noise of the universe. Tonight felt different. The computer started beeping at exactly 2:47 a.m. Amy looked at the display and frowned. The signal was coming from Tau Ceti, a star system about 12 light-years from Earth. But it was not coming from the planet that scientists thought might have life. Instead, the signal came from a small, dead moon that should have been frozen, solid for millions of years. Amy put on her headphones and listened. The sound was strange. It was not like radio waves or normal space noise. This signal seemed to go straight into her brain, making patterns that she could understand without knowing how. Numbers appeared in her mind, mathematical sequences that felt urgent and desperate. She called her supervisor, Dr. Ross Martin, who lived 20 minutes away. "Ross, you need to get here now. We have something." While waiting, Amy recorded everything. The signal repeated every 47 minutes, but each time it got a little weaker. She ran the numbers through every computer program they had. The results made her hands shake. The signal was artificial. Someone or something had built a machine to send this message. But the most frightening part was what the computer found, hidden in the mathematical patterns. Buried in the signal was a perfect star map showing Earth's location in the galaxy. Whoever sent this message knew exactly where humanity lived. Dr. Martin arrived to find Amy staring at the data with wide eyes. He was a practical man who had spent 40 years listening to space, and he had never seen anything like this. "Have you told anyone else?" he asked. "Not yet. I wanted you to see it first." They spent the next hour checking everything twice. The signal was real, it was artificial, and it was getting weaker. At the current rate, it would fade to nothing in less than 3 days. "We need to call the government," Martin said. "This is bigger than us." Within 6 hours, the small radio station was crowded with people in expensive suits and military uniforms. General Patricia Wells took charge of the operation. She was a tall woman with gray hair who had seen strange things before, but nothing like this. "What do we know?" she asked Amy. "The signal comes from a moon around Tau Ceti. The moon should be dead, but something is transmitting from deep underground. The message is mathematical, but it feels desperate, like a cry for help." The general studied the data. "You said it knows where Earth is?" "Yes. The star map is perfect. Too perfect. Whoever sent this has been watching us." Dr. Cross, an expert in alien communication who had flown in from Washington, examined the signal patterns. "This is not random," he said. "The mathematical sequences are designed to be understood by any intelligent species. But there is something else. The signal is changing." Amy pulled up the latest recording. In the past hour, new numbers had appeared at the end of the message. Numbers that counted down. 71 hours, 32 minutes, Dr. Cross read from his translation. "It is a countdown timer. General Wells made a decision that would change human history. We are going to respond to this signal, and we are going to send a ship. The fastest ship humanity had ever built was the experimental vessel called Harbinger. It could reach other star systems in days instead of years, using an engine that folded space itself. Captain Rex Holt had commanded the ship on 3 test flights, but never anything like this. The general called Holt to her temporary command center. "Captain, we need you to take your ship to Tau Ceti. Something there is calling for help, and we have less than 3 days to respond." Holt was a quiet man who had spent his life pushing the boundaries of what was possible. He looked at the signal data and nodded. "When do we leave?" "As soon as you can get your crew ready." The Harbinger crew was small but skilled. Beth Kane was the best engineer in the space program, able to fix anything that could break. Dr. Ian Cross specialized in studying life forms that might be different from Earth. Lieutenant Nova Kim could speak 6 languages, and had trained to communicate with alien species, even though none had ever been found. As the crew prepared for departure, Amy made a discovery that chilled everyone. She had been analyzing the background radiation around the signal source. The moon was not just dead. It was wrong. The radiation patterns showed signs of massive energy weapons being used in that star system. Not recently, but hundreds of years ago. Someone fought a war there, she told General Wells. A big one, and I think whoever is calling for help might be the last survivor. The Harbinger launched 18 hours after the signal was first detected. As the ship entered fold space and began its journey to Tau Ceti, the countdown timer in the alien message showed 54 hours remaining. During the flight, Nova worked on understanding more of the signal. She discovered that the mathematical patterns were not just numbers. They were emotions, fear, loneliness, and something else that made her feel cold inside. Guilt. Whoever is sending this message, she reported to the captain, they are not just asking for help. They are warning us about something. Dr. Cross studied the star map hidden in the signal. It showed not just Earth's location, but the positions of dozens of other star systems. Most were marked with symbols that the computer could not translate. But the pattern was clear. The marked systems formed a rough sphere around Earth, as if something was slowly moving inward. Captain, Cross said quietly, I think we are flying toward something that destroyed an entire civilization, and I think it might be coming for us next. As the Harbinger approached Tau Ceti, the crew could see that Amy's analysis was correct. The main planet was a ball of fused glass, its surface melted by weapons beyond human understanding. Space around the planet was filled with debris from what must have been thousands of ships. But the small moon continued to broadcast its desperate message. Now they were close enough to detect more details. The signal came from a structure buried 3 kilometers under the moon's surface. The structure was huge, stretching for hundreds of kilometers underground, and it was still partially functional after all these years. Captain Holt gave the order to land. Whatever was down there had been calling across the galaxy for help. Humanity was about to answer that call, even though they had no idea what they would find in the depths of the dead world. The countdown timer showed 16 hours remaining when they touched down on the moon's frozen surface. In the distance, the glassed planet hung in the sky like a warning. Something terrible had happened in this star system long ago. Now humanity was about to learn what it was. The drilling equipment screamed against the frozen surface of the moon. Beth Kane wiped sweat from her forehead as she guided the massive boring machine through layers of ice that had not seen sunlight for 1,000 years. Each meter down revealed new mysteries. The ice contained fragments of metal that should not exist, pieces of technology that human science could not identify. 2 kilometers down, she called to Captain Holt. The signal is getting stronger. Dr. Cross examined the ice, samples under his portable microscope. Inside the frozen layers, he found traces of organic compounds that made no sense. These are not natural, he said. Someone seeded this ice with biological markers, like they wanted to leave a record of what happened here. Nova monitored the alien signal from their temporary base camp. The mathematical patterns were becoming more complex as they got closer to the source. Now the message included 3-dimensional maps of the underground structure they were approaching. The facility was enormous, spreading out like a spider web beneath the moon's surface. Captain, Nova said, the message is changing again. New symbols are appearing. I think whatever is down there knows we are coming. The breakthrough came at kilometer 3. The drill bit suddenly dropped into empty space. Beth lowered cameras into the hole and gasped at what she saw. A vast chamber opened below them, filled with soft blue light that had no visible source. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and move when looked at directly. We found it, she said. The descent into the alien facility took 4 hours. The humans wore full environmental suits, not knowing what atmosphere they might find. But their instruments showed the air was breathable, filled with the same mixture of gases that Earth life needed. The architecture made no sense. Corridors twisted back on themselves in ways that hurt to look at. Rooms connected to each other through doorways that seemed too small. until a person walked through them and found the space expanding around them. Gravity flowed in strange directions, sometimes pulling sideways or even upward. This place was not built by beings like us, Dr. Cross observed. Whoever made this could manipulate space itself. They followed the signal deeper into the facility. The walls showed signs of great age but also of advanced technology far beyond human understanding. Panels covered in flowing symbols provided light and warmth. The air carried a faint humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Lieutenant Kim stopped at a section of wall covered in different symbols. These were not like the flowing script they had seen elsewhere. These were crude, carved hastily into the metal with desperate force. "These look like warnings," she said. "The style is completely different, like someone was trying to leave a message before they died." The deeper they went, the more warning symbols they found, always carved, in the same desperate style, always pointing them away from certain corridors. The builders of this place had wanted people to stay away from something, but the signal they were following led directly toward the forbidden areas. Captain Holt made the decision to continue. They had come too far to turn back now. The countdown timer showed 9 hours remaining, and they still did not know what it was counting down to. The corridor opened into a chamber so large that their lights could not reach the far walls. The floor was covered with rows of what looked like metal boxes, each one the size of a small room. Dr. Cross realized what they were looking at. "These are cells," he said. "This is a prison." Most of the cells stood open and empty, but their scanners detected that a few still contained something. As they walked between the rows, they found evidence of the former prisoners. Scorch marks on the walls showed where great energy had been unleashed. Some cells were twisted into impossible shapes, as if reality itself had been bent by whatever lived inside them. At the center of the prison, they found the source of the signal. One cell remained sealed, its walls glowing with symbols that pulsed in time with the alien message. Inside, something waited. The scanners showed a life form unlike anything in human experience. It existed partially in normal space and partially somewhere else, its body shifting between different states of matter. Nova approached the cell's control panel. The symbols on its surface responded to her touch, rearranging themselves into patterns she could somehow understand. "It wants to communicate," she said. "Be careful," Captain Holt warned. "We do not know what this thing is capable of." Nova activated the communication system. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Information flooded into her mind. Not words or pictures, but pure knowledge that bypassed language entirely. She saw the history of this place in moments that felt like years. The being in the cell called itself Chorus. It belonged to a species that had once ruled this part of the galaxy, creatures of immense psychic power who could reshape reality with their thoughts. But something had gone wrong. Something had infected them. Nova staggered back from the control panel, her face pale. "It is trying to warn us," she said. "This facility was built to contain its own people. They imprisoned their own kind to prevent something worse from spreading." Dr. Cross ran his scanners over the sealed cell. The readings made no sense. The being inside existed in multiple dimensions at once, held in place by technology that worked on principles human science had never discovered. "What were they trying to contain?" Captain Holt asked. Nova touched the control panel again, more carefully this time. New images filled her mind. Darkness between the stars, things that fed on consciousness itself, an infection that turned psychic beings into doorways for cosmic horrors. "They called them the Devourers," Nova said, her voice barely a whisper. "And the countdown is not random. One of them is coming here." The chamber around them suddenly felt very cold. In the distance, they could hear something that sounded like metal groaning under immense pressure. The ancient facility was still functional, but it was failing after centuries of operation. When it finally stopped working, everything inside would become visible to whatever was approaching through the dark between stars. Captain Holt looked at his crew. They were 12 light-years from Earth, trapped in an alien prison with something that claimed cosmic monsters were coming to destroy them all. The countdown timer showed 7 hours remaining. "We need to understand what we are dealing with," he said. "Nova, keep talking to our friend in the cell. The rest of us will explore this place and figure out how it works. If something is coming for us, we need to be ready." As the crew spread out through the ancient prison, none of them noticed that the warning symbols carved into the walls had begun to glow with the same blue light that filled the chambers. The facility was waking up, preparing for what it had been built to contain. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, something ancient and hungry sensed that the psychic beacon it had been following for so long was finally within reach. Chorus spoke without words, pouring memories directly into Nova's mind like water from a broken dam. She saw civilizations that stretched across entire star systems, beings of pure thought who could reshape matter with their will, and cities that floated in space without any visible support. The Mindweavers had been the galaxy's children of possibility. Where humans built machines, they simply wished things into existence. Where other species used tools, they became the tools themselves. Their consciousness could reach across light years, connecting every member of their race in a web of shared thought and experience. "We were gods," Chorus whispered into Nova's thoughts. "And that was our mistake." The images shifted, showing the Mindweavers as they expanded beyond their home galaxy. They had grown curious about the empty spaces between the galactic arms, the dark regions where no stars shone. Their consciousness reached out into that darkness, searching for new forms of life to understand and befriend. Something reached back. Nova saw flashes of the first contact. Entities that existed in the spaces between thoughts. Beings made of hunger and emptiness that fed on consciousness itself. They were older than galaxies, remnants from a universe that had died before this one was born. They had been waiting in the darkness for thinking beings to find them. "The Devourers do not destroy," Chorus explained. "They consume. They eat the very idea of existence, leaving nothing behind, not even memories." The infection spread through the Mindweaver collective consciousness like poison through water. Those who touched the Devourers became bridges, allowing the hungry entities to enter normal space. The infected Mindweavers retained their bodies and most of their minds, but their purpose changed. They began preparing the galaxy for feeding. Captain Holt and Dr. Cross had found the prison's central control room, while Nova communicated with Chorus. The technology was beyond human understanding, but some functions were marked with symbols that seemed almost universal. Holt touched what looked like a display screen, and the room filled with three-dimensional images. They saw the final days of the Mindweaver civilization. Planet after planet went dark as the infection spread. Entire star systems were converted into feeding grounds for the Devourers. The uninfected Mindweavers fought back with weapons that could destroy suns, but nothing worked against entities that existed partially outside of reality. They had to make a choice, Dr. Cross realized. Save themselves or save the galaxy. The Mindweavers chose sacrifice. They gathered all the infected members of their species and imprisoned them in facilities like this one, scattered across the galaxy. Then, they turned their reality-shaping powers on themselves, destroying every Mindweaver world and ship to prevent the infection from spreading further. But the prison facilities were designed to do more than just contain the infected. They were psychic lighthouses, broadcasting warnings to any species that might one day develop interstellar travel. The Mindweavers had died to give future civilizations a chance to prepare for what was coming. Beth had been exploring the lower levels of the facility when she found something that made her call for the captain immediately. In a chamber far below the prison cells, she discovered the remains of the facility's original purpose. This was not just a prison, she told Holt over the radio. It was a weapons factory. The chamber contained half-built devices that hurt to look at directly. Machines designed to wound reality itself. Weapons that could strike at beings existing between dimensions. Most were incomplete, abandoned when the Mindweavers ran out of time. But one device was finished. A massive construct that filled half the chamber, covered in warning symbols and sealed behind barriers of crystallized space. According to the control panels Beth found, it was called the Reality Anchor. Nova was still connected to Chorus when she felt the aliens' excitement at Beth's discovery. "Yes," Chorus said, "our final weapon, but we never had the chance to test it." "What does it do?" Nova asked. The answer came as a flood of technical information that Nova's mind could barely process. The reality anchor was designed to lock the local area of spacetime into its current state, preventing dimensional intrusion. Devourers could not enter a region where reality itself refused to bend. But the weapon came with a terrible cost. Once activated, it would need a conscious mind to maintain it. Someone would have to stay connected to the device, using their willpower to keep reality stable. And that person could never leave. Or the anchor would fail, and the protection would collapse. Captain Holt made his way to Beth's location to examine the weapon. As he studied the alien technology, he began to understand the true scope of what they were facing. This was not just about one dead civilization or one approaching enemy. This was about survival of consciousness itself in the universe. "How long do we have?" he asked Nova. She consulted with Chorus. "The countdown measures the approach of a scout ship. The Devourers send these ahead to locate new feeding grounds. When it arrives, it will detect every thinking mind in this star system. Then it will call for the others." Dr. Cross had been studying the prison cells, trying to understand how the infection worked. What he found was worse than he had imagined. "The infected mindweavers are still here," he reported. "Not dead, suspended. The cells are keeping them alive but unconscious." "Why?" Captain Holt asked. "Because killing them would release the devourer essence they carry. The builders of this place could not destroy the infection, so they had to contain it forever." Nova felt Chorus growing weaker. The ancient being had used most of its remaining life force to communicate with humanity. It had waited 300 years for someone to answer its call, and now it was finally ready to rest. "There is something else," Chorus said, its mental voice fading. "Your species is different from ours. Your minds work in ways we never understood, chaotic, contradictory. This might be why you can resist the initial contact with the Devourers where we could not." The countdown timer showed 4 hours remaining when the crew gathered in the control room to plan their response. They had found a weapon that might work against cosmic horror, but using it would require someone to give up their life. And they still did not know if humanity was strong enough to face what was coming. Outside the facility, the frozen moon continued its orbit around the dead planet. In the depths of space beyond the system's edge, something that should not exist began to take notice of the small warm minds that had finally answered the ancient call for help. The darkness above Tau Ceti began to move. What had seemed like empty space twisted and folded, revealing something that made human eyes hurt to perceive it directly. The Devourer scout ship was not built from matter as humans understood it. Instead, it was crafted from the absence of things, a hole in reality shaped into purpose. Dr. Cross stared at his scanner readings in disbelief. "It is here early." The countdown showed 2 more hours. "Time works differently for them," Nova said, her connection to Chorus growing weaker as the alien being faded. "They exist between moments, in the spaces where reality pauses to decide what comes next." Captain Holt ordered his crew to prepare for whatever was coming. The Harbinger's weapons were advanced by human standards, but they had been designed to fight other humans, not entities that existed partially outside the universe. He had no idea if their plasma cannons and missile systems would even affect something like this. The Devourer ship settled into orbit around the moon like a storm cloud made of hungry thoughts. Its presence immediately began affecting the human crew. Nova found herself struggling to remember why they had come here. Beth's hands shook as she tried to work on the facility's power systems. Dr. Cross kept forgetting important details about their mission, as if the information was being slowly erased from his mind. "It is feeding," Chorus warned through the failing connection. "Even approaching one of them begins the consumption process. Your thoughts, your memories, your very sense of self will be drained away until nothing remains." But something unexpected happened. Where the mindweavers had felt their consciousness being drawn away like water through a drain, the humans experienced something different. The Devourer's influence felt like static in their heads, annoying and disorienting, but not overwhelming. Holt realized what was happening when he found himself arguing with his own thoughts about whether to surrender. Unlike the unified consciousness of the mindweavers, human minds were naturally chaotic. They contained contradictions, doubts, and multiple competing ideas all at once. The devourer was trying to feed on their consciousness, but it kept getting confused by the noise. "Keep arguing with yourselves," he ordered his crew over the radio. "Think about things that make you angry. Remember embarrassing moments. Be as human as possible." The strategy worked better than anyone had hoped. Dr. Cross found that by deliberately thinking about conflicting scientific theories at the same time, he could make the devourer's influence weaken. Beth discovered that her engineering mind, trained to see multiple solutions to every problem, created enough mental static to stay functional. Nova had the strongest connection to the alien presence because of her link with Chorus. But she also had the best defense. Her job was communication, which meant her mind was constantly switching between different languages and ways of thinking. The devourer could not get a solid grip on thoughts that refused to stay in one pattern. "It cannot understand us," she reported. "We are too messy for it to feed on efficiently." But their resistance came at a cost. Every moment they fought against, the devourer's influence required enormous mental effort. They could not maintain this level of cognitive chaos forever. And the entity above them was learning, adapting its approach to human psychology. Chorus used the last of its strength to share one final piece of information. The reality anchor weapon could be modified to work with human consciousness instead of Mindweaver thought patterns. But it would require all 4 crew members to operate it together, their contradictory human minds working in deliberate discord to create a psychic firewall that the devourers could not penetrate. "The weapon was designed for our unified consciousness," Chorus explained. "But your chaotic minds might actually work better. You can create a barrier of pure noise that will hide your entire species from detection." The catch was that whoever operated the reality anchor would have to stay connected to it forever. They would become permanent guardians maintaining the psychic lighthouse that kept Earth hidden from cosmic predators. They could never go home. Captain Holt gathered his crew in the weapon chamber. The reality anchor filled the space like a mechanical mountain, its surfaces covered in controls that responded to thought rather than touch. Even inactive, it radiated power that made the air itself feel heavy. "You know what this means," he told them. "If we do this, we save Earth, but we lose everything else. Our families will never know what happened to us. We will spend the rest of our lives on this dead moon, keeping the monsters away." Beth spoke first. "My family thinks I am already dead every time I go to space. At least this time it will be for something important." Dr. Cross nodded. "I became a scientist to discover new life. I never imagined I would have to fight for the right of life to continue existing." Nova looked toward the sealed cell where Chorus was finally dying after centuries of lonely vigil. "Someone has to keep watch. Someone has to remember what the Mindweavers died to protect." Above them, the Devourer ship began to descend toward the moon's surface. Its presence grew stronger, and the crew could feel their thoughts becoming sluggish and confused. They were running out of time. Holt made his decision. "We do this together, all of us or none of us." They approached the reality anchor's control interfaces. The alien technology responded to their touch, awakening systems that had waited centuries for someone to operate them. The weapon began to charge, drawing power from the moon's core and from dimensions beyond human understanding. The Devourer ship landed on the surface directly above the facility. Through the facility's sensors, they could see it beginning to extend tendrils of darkness into the ground, searching for the source of consciousness it had detected. "Now," Captain Holt said. The 4 humans placed their hands on the reality anchors, control surfaces, and opened their minds to the weapon. Pain shot through their heads as alien technology interfaced with human consciousness. But instead of the unified thought the device expected, it received 4 different perspectives, 4 separate streams of chaotic human thinking. The result was unlike anything the Mindweavers had ever achieved. Instead of a focused beam of psychic energy, the reality anchor generated a storm of consciousness noise that spread outward from the moon at the speed of thought. The psychic static was so intense that it created a bubble of protected space around the entire Tau Ceti system. The Devourer ship, caught in the expanding field of cognitive chaos, began to shake apart. Its existence depended on finding organized consciousness to feed on, but the reality anchor was broadcasting pure human mental noise, the kind of contradictory thoughts that made the entity feel sick and confused. For the first time in cosmic ages, a devourer retreated. The scout ship fled back into the darkness between stars, carrying with it a message that would puzzle its kind for generations to come. Somewhere in the galaxy was a species whose minds were too chaotic to consume, too stubborn to control, and too loud to ignore. The humans found themselves permanently connected to the reality anchor. Their consciousness expanded beyond their bodies, but still fundamentally themselves. They had become something new, guardians standing watch between humanity and the hungry dark. The countdown timer had reached 0, but instead of marking the end, it had become the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. 6 months after the Devourer scout fled from Tau Ceti, Earth received a message that changed everything. It came not through radio waves or quantum signals, but as pure information that appeared simultaneously in the minds of every human scientist working on deep space projects. The message was simple. This is Captain Rex Holt of the Harbinger. We are alive, we are safe, and we have work to do. Dr. Amy Foster was the first to understand what had happened. The crew had not died or disappeared. They had evolved into something new. Their consciousness expanded beyond their physical bodies, while remaining fundamentally human. They had become living lighthouses, broadcasting a signal that hid Earth from the cosmic predators that hunted thinking species. The psychic firewall they created around the solar system was invisible to human technology, but its effects were immediately obvious. For the first time in decades, Earth's deep space monitoring stations detected signs of alien activity. Ships appeared at the edge of the solar system, not to invade, but to request sanctuary. The first visitors were refugees, survivors from species that had encountered the Devourers and barely escaped. They came in broken ships, their crews reduced to a handful of individuals who had hidden in shielded areas while their worlds burned. They sought the protection of the strange noise that had driven away the cosmic hunters. General Wells, now in charge of Earth's first interstellar defense program, established contact with the refugees. Through careful translation, humanity learned the true scope of the threat they faced. The Devourers were not unique entities, but part of a vast ecology of predators that fed on consciousness across multiple universes. Most species that achieved interstellar travel eventually attracted their attention. The lucky ones were destroyed quickly. The unlucky ones became food sources. Their entire civilizations converted into consciousness farms that fed the hungry entities for millennia. But humanity was different. The refugees spoke in amazed whispers about the species whose minds were too chaotic for the Devourers to properly digest. Word spread through the hidden networks of survivor civilizations. There was a place where the monsters could not reach, protected by beings whose thoughts were so contradictory and stubborn that they created a natural barrier against psychic predation. The Guardians, as the expanded crew of the Harbinger came to be known, worked to strengthen Earth's defenses. They had access to Chorus's memories and the accumulated knowledge of the Mindweaver civilization. Using this information, they guided human scientists in developing new technologies based on cognitive dissonance. Earth's first consciousness static generators were crude devices that created fields of contradictory thoughts around space stations and important facilities. But they worked. Any devourer attempting to feed in these areas found itself confused and disoriented by the artificial mental noise. Dr. Cross, his consciousness now spread between his physical body on the prison moon and quantum states that existed in 17 dimensions, helped develop the cognitive dissonance drives that would power humanity's new starships. These engines worked by creating controlled paradoxes in local spacetime, making it impossible for reality-eating entities to establish a foothold. The refugee species brought their own knowledge and skills. The Whisper Folk, whose civilization had survived by hiding in the quantum foam between atoms, taught humans how to build probability shields. The Crystal Singers, living beings made of conscious mineral matrices, shared techniques for storing memory in inorganic structures that Devourers could not consume. But the greatest discovery came when Dr. Ian Cross, Working with his expanded consciousness, realized that humanity's chaotic thinking was not just a defense, it was a weapon. The reality anchor could be modified to broadcast human thought patterns across interstellar distances. Not just the static that protected Earth, but focused transmissions of pure human stubbornness, creativity, and refusal to accept impossible situations. When aimed at devourer feeding grounds, these broadcasts could actually disrupt the entity's ability to maintain coherent existence. "We can fight back," Cross reported to Earth. "Human consciousness is like poison to them. The more chaotic and contradictory our thoughts, the more it hurts them to be near us." Earth's response was immediate and overwhelming. Volunteers lined up to join the Psychic Defense Corps, training to think in deliberately chaotic patterns that could be weaponized against cosmic threats. Artists, comedians, philosophers, and anyone whose job involved thinking in unexpected ways were recruited to create new forms of consciousness that would be especially toxic to reality predators. The prison moon became humanity's first extraterrestrial base, surrounded by a growing fleet of ships powered by paradox engines and crewed by beings from a dozen different rescued species. They called it Lighthouse Station, and it became the headquarters for humanity's new role as guardians of conscious life in the galaxy. Lieutenant Nova Kim, her awareness now spanning multiple dimensions while her body remained anchored to the reality anchor, established communication networks with survivor groups across the galaxy. She became the voice that whispered hope into the darkness, telling hidden civilizations that someone was finally fighting back against the ancient hunger. Manatee's deep space explorers. "We have learned something important out here," he said. "Consciousness is under attack in this universe. There are things in the dark between galaxies that want to eat every thinking mind that has ever existed. Most species that encounter them either die or hide. But humanity has a gift that no other species possesses. We are too stubborn to die quietly, too chaotic to be easily consumed, and too creative to accept that some battles cannot be won. The universe has been waiting billions of years for a species crazy enough to tell the darkness to go away. We are that species. We are the ones who will stand guard while others sleep. We are the lighthouse keepers who will make sure the light never goes out." From Lighthouse Station, the Guardians continued their watch. They had discovered that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or courage, but their beautiful, chaotic refusal to think in straight lines. It was a quality that made them uniquely suited to fight monsters that could only understand ordered thought. The dead world had spoken first, but humanity would have the last word. In the depths of space, on a frozen moon, orbiting a destroyed planet, 4 humans had become something more than themselves while remaining stubbornly human. Other species began to arrive not as refugees, but as allies. They came to learn from humanity's chaotic wisdom and to add their own strengths to the growing coalition. The harmony builders, whose music could reshape matter, composed symphonies that created safe passages through devourer territory. The logic weavers, beings of pure mathematics, learned to incorporate human contradiction into their equations, creating formulas that could solve problems by refusing to accept that solutions were impossible. Captain Holt found that his consciousness could now reach across the galaxy, touching the minds of humans on Earth and allies scattered among the stars. Through him, humanity began to coordinate the first organized resistance against cosmic predation that the universe had ever seen. The devourers, ancient and hungry, discovered that their food supply was fighting back. For the first time in their existence, they encountered prey that not only resisted consumption, but actively made them sick. Human thought patterns, broadcast through the growing network of psychic lighthouses, created zones where the entities could not function properly. Some devourer fleets simply avoided areas where humans operated. Others attempted direct assault, only to find their reality-eating abilities neutralized by weapons that worked on principles of deliberate contradiction. A few even retreated entirely to deeper dimensions, seeking prey in universes where chaotic consciousness had not yet evolved. On Earth, children grew up learning that thinking in circles and changing their minds frequently was not just acceptable but necessary for the survival of conscious life everywhere. Schools taught courses in creative stubbornness and productive confusion. The planet became a fortress of cognitive chaos that other species could study but never fully understand. The lighthouse station expanded over the years, becoming a city that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Humans worked alongside beings made of living crystal, creatures that existed as quantum probability clouds, and entities that communicated through controlled explosions of possibility. Dr. Amy Foster, now elderly but still monitoring signals from space, received one last transmission from the Guardians. It came not as mathematics or words but as pure emotion, gratitude, joy, and the absolute certainty that the darkness would never again go unopposed. The universe had found its guardians at last. They were chaotic, contradictory, and completely unwilling to accept that some fights could not be won. They argued with themselves, changed their minds without warning, and refused to think in ways that made sense to cosmic predators. They were perfectly, stubbornly human. And because of that, consciousness itself would endure.